Hello, everyone. Welcome to Reimagining Service, Dismantling White Supremacy Culture in the Hospitality Industry, a webinar presented in partnership with Drive Change. I'm Debbie Holloway, Impact and Community Coordinator here at the James Beard Foundation, and I'm so happy to be welcoming you all this afternoon. Since March of 2020, the James Beard Foundation has been hosting virtual events and industry support webinars, just like this one, to help navigate the challenges of COVID-19 and provide resources for the hospitality industry, and to better stay connected through difficult times. Before I introduce our excellent moderator for today, here's some quick housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded. We'll post a link to the recording on openforgood.com after the program wraps. If you have questions for the panelists, please write them in using the webinar toolbar. We'll keep an eye on your questions as they come in, and if we have time, we'll introduce them into the conversation or dedicate some time to answer questions at the end. And then if you're having technical difficulties, just message us using the webinar toolbar, and we'll do what we can to troubleshoot, although leaving the room and then rejoining immediately usually works just fine. So first, I'll introduce our excellent moderator, Mavis-Jay Sanders. MJ is a food and social equity advocate based in Brooklyn, and she's the founding COO of Food Plus People and the Director of Culinary Development and Education for Drive Change. And Mavis-Jay is actually going to introduce the rest of our panelists and then get the conversation going. Thank you, MJ.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Debbie. Okay, so today we have Emany Williams. She's a professional chef, owner of Manny's Meals Catering, and a chef for the fraternity of Alpha Gamma Delta, based out of the University of South Carolina. Aretah Ettarh. She's a sous chef at Gramercy Tavern, which is part of USHG. After graduating from the University of Delaware, studying hotel and restaurant and institutional management, she attended the Culinary Institute of America at Greystone, where she earned her certificate in the Accelerated Culinary Arts Program. Shout out to you as well. And finally, Sabrina Brockman is a co-founder of Grandchamps, a Brooklyn restaurant that celebrates Haitian culture through home-style cooking and is committed to providing quality, healthy food, hiring locally, supporting and collaborating with creatives, sharing culture, and embracing others, and adding value to their community. That's a lineup for you right there. I am super, super grateful to be in this space with you all. Shout out to Debbie and Sarah for coordinating all of this. Big ups to the Drive Change team and everybody who works with the Hospitality for Social Justice program. And thank you to JBF for leveraging their platform so that we could have this discussion through a medium that would reach a lot more people that are in that aren't necessarily in our direct communities. So at Drive Change, we have a program called Hospitality for Social Justice, which is actually a training for people who are power holders in the hospitality industry to actually sit down and give them the tools to try to start the work and actually try to dismantle white supremacy culture in their establishments that they work in. So when we do that, there's something that we do around setting the rules. We have 5 agreements. These lovely ladies have heard these agreements, and these are something that I definitely want to put out to everybody who is witnessing and watching this. As you enter this space, please, 1, be present. 2, be willing to grow. 3, expect and accept non-disclosure, or I'm sorry, non-closure. That is going to be super important. We're not going to solve all of the world's problems in this exact moment. These are just professional people who are weighing in with their experiences, which are 100% valid and valued and need to be listened to. 4, say the thing. It's okay to speak the truth. Don't be afraid. Don't hold back. And 5, we're creating a brave space. Those last 2 are going to be super important in utilizing this space as a place to learn and ask questions. Ultimately, all that is about mitigating any further harm to like marginalized communities in our industry, right? So to set up for a little bit of history for those who are coming in, and then I'll pass the mic because at this point I'm tired of listening to me speak. Let's talk about like some hard facts as we get set, okay? So Black bodies, Black and like Black labor was the first successful form of capitalism in America. Historically, that was exploited through the capture and enslavement, and now modernly through mass incarceration. Anyone paying any kind of attention can clearly see how our country's legacy of enslavement and white supremacy still permeates the American workforce today, right? Especially in the hospitality industry. If you think back to the founding of the nation and enslaved Africans, like they really built the standard for the American service industry. Blacks created the frameworks and crafted all the details, not only for domestic and formal service, but also really were the people who dictated all of the operating procedures and training of like all the people and bodies that were doing the work. But like over time, like through the disenfranchisement of the enslaved, specifically like the withholding of literacy development, enslavers really did like wield a pen and use that power to erase all the hard work and technical skills of the enslaved and kind of just rewrote all of our ancestors as like these magical Negroes that were born with this innate ability to like cook and nurture, but like no real capacity to learn or for like higher thinking. And then there was like this whole dynamic of like bringing in like impoverished whites or POCs with proximity to whiteness, and they were hired on like any kind of workforce, especially on plantations, and were kind of like established as like these overseers that police Black labor, most of the time doing that labor being work that they themselves could never actually accomplish themselves. And you can actually like go into any like operating dining room in America today and still see those parallels. While in no way should it be incumbent upon the oppressed to dismantle white supremacy, it is a system that everybody here, like on this panel right now, has had to like come up in and is working to in some manner to abolish like from the inside out, simply by having the courageousness to claim space and power in our professional lives. So I do want to thank all of you ladies for being here and being willing to be vulnerable and honest in these moments. So with that being said, let's start with Aretah. I'm going to pass you the question of what responsibility does the hospitality industry need to take for the history and impact of these harmful structures?
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. Thank you once again to the team for inviting me to be on this panel. I'm really excited to be a part of this and to hold space with these incredible women. Responsibility that the hospitality industry has. I think a lot about the dreaded Blackout Tuesday that we as Black people and Black women saw, and it was just like the most nonsense day of like, truly, it felt like of years past. Like I was astonished by the callousness that white people had about just posting a Black square and saying, this is it, we've done our part. And so I connect that back to the hospitality industry because I saw a lot of, especially white chefs and white industry leaders in in like specifically in the restaurant industry, because that's most of the people I follow, who were posting these Black squares and saying, you know, we stand in solidarity with Black people. And it's like, what have you done within your own institutions, within your own spaces to actually show that you care about Black people? Like, what are you doing to follow through with what your Black square is supposed to do? And so I think that's where a lot of that responsibility lies. You know, like the performative allyship, I'm so over it. It's truly, it's a waste of time. It's a waste of energy, not only on their part, but on ours, because there's so many people who they take those crumbs and they're like, yes, you know, they do care. It's like, no. Like the words don't mean anything. The squares don't mean anything. What are you doing to follow through? And so I think that's where the responsibility lies. I think it's taking ownership of the fact that if you are going to make a vocal statement to your constituents, to your people who follow your accounts, who are interested in your food and your restaurants, what are you going to do then to follow through? Like, that is where the responsibility lies, because if you stop at just saying you care, then not actually do anything to show that you care, then once again, we're not going to progress. And it's not, like MJ started this conversation, it's not on us as the Black people, as the marginalized people, to kind of try to carry that mantle forward. It's up to white people to say, you know what, it's time I actually take some responsibility here. Drop the mic.
Mic broken. Anybody want to add on to that? Or have?
I'd like to add on to that. You know, I think that the industry as a whole just like, you know, we know that it just creates harm. And I think that the industry has a way of doing things, and lots of different industries, not just food or restaurant industry, has a way of deciding that if we don't, like, we're not in the business of like taking care of people or like dealing with the harm that we create, like that's government's job to deal with. And government fails those people, right? And then there's like this big gap of whatever is created. And I don't want to even narrowly define that, because you know, the work of the industry is to actually take a look at that gap as like the biggest problem, plus the harm that it creates as a whole, and start to actually see that as a risk. Because when you harm people and you harm the environment, you are creating a situation that is unproductive, and it's not effective and it's not efficient, which is actually against capitalism. Like, the goal is to make things better, and the only way that you can make things better is by addressing like the weakest thing that is impacting that industry. And I think that it's possible to do this in a way that, because I think the industry has fears, right? Like, they don't, like, the industry doesn't trust employees. They don't trust the people that they hire to do the work. And by behaving that way, they're creating this issue for themselves. But if they just adjusted their mindset, even subtly, to say, instead of, you know, fighting this thing, let me take a look at it and see what I can do. And by investing in that, when you invest in good, you're going to get good outcomes. You know, I believe that 100%. So I think that the industry can just take some time to look at itself as a first step and say, like, these are the biggest problems that we create out there. And let's start talking about how we fix it.
I hope everybody and their mom heard you start speaking about harm as a risk, and ultimately, like the not trusting and that power hoarding. Like, I really feel like that's really like the crux of all of it. Yeah, I think you couldn't have hit it more on the head with that. Absolutely. Emany, how about, or before I go on to the next question, did you have anything, or are you ready for the next?
I'm ready for the next. Sabrina kind of took the words out of my mouth with that one, so.
Definitely knocked that out of the park. So I think Aretah and Sabrina both spoke about it being really the job of the people who are holding power, to not just to be about like performative allyship, but like really making like taking actions to make that change. You see a lot of programs like Draft Change HSJ and a lot of other organizations that are popping up that are offering like some of that coaching. What do leaders and owners really need to understand um, when claiming that they want to make a change?
I think leaders and owners kind of have to figure out what it is they want to change before addressing anything. You can't walk into a situation and say, I want to change whatever it is you're trying to change without first addressing that there's a problem. And I know in my experiences personally, there have been a lot of situations where people in leadership don't see a problem. So if you don't see a problem, you can't change something. And it's kind of difficult when you're the single Black person that's in that situation, and it's like, okay, these are the things that are happening, so this is what needs to change. But I've noticed that a lot of time, non-people, like people that aren't of color, they have a problem seeing their own faults, so they can't really address anything without taking it personally. And it's like, I'm not personally attacking you, this is just what the system is. And so can you take what this system is and somehow try to flip it so that this is no longer an issue? So I feel like we can't address change without first addressing the issue, right? Yeah, what I got.
I would just add on to that if I can, is that, it's work. And when we're trying to fix these things, we're gonna experience a natural resistance, because this system was actually designed to force the behaviors that we see happening in these spaces. And when leaders start to make changes that are like against what that system is pushing at you, you are going to run into challenges that you're going to have to decide, like, no, I've made this decision and I know it's a good decision. I'm going to see this through, and maybe that's going to change your returns on a particular investment. I mean, in terms of like how much time it takes to achieve those returns, or maybe you're just you are running into things that feel like that next thing is impossible, but you really need to believe in and decide what you're going to do and persevere through those challenges. It's something that I think a lot of us have experienced in kind of creating boundaries for ourselves, where, when we create boundaries with people around us, they really fight it tooth and nail. And it's the same way of kind of going at those challenges. So I would just say, like, brace yourself. If you're going to make a decision to make a change, commit to it and do it. And I think it's going to work.
Yeah, I mean, they really, you ladies both just crushed that answer. I also think it once again ties into the idea. It's like, okay, so then white people are ready to make a change, and then they immediately go to the marginalized person. They're just like, so how do we do it? It's like, let's stop right there, because listen, once again, like, not only do I not have all the answers, like a lot of what we learn is, one, straight up because of our experience first, and then we start doing our own like research and homework. And two, like, I'm a chef. I'm not like, that is not my area of expertise, is not developing systems of diversity and inclusion in a corporate structure. And so it was always just like, it was always so interesting to just see white people go, okay, so Aretah, why aren't there more Black people in fine dining? And I'm like, I don't know, you tell me. Like, I'm the Black person here. Like, what do you want me to do? Like, I'm the exception, not the rule. So it doesn't make sense for you to come to me and ask like the one person that you see, how do I solve this problem? Where it's like, you got to ask your homies around you, what are we doing that is not creating a safe enough space that Black people actually want to work in fine dining? Like, what is it about this structure that we've established that is not creating a space that actually makes other people who aren't white want to enjoy this the experience? So I think it just ties into, you know, what my fellow panelists said. It's like these systems were built on harm, and the people who are being harmed should not be the ones who should be solving the problems. We should be the ones who are eventually benefiting from the systems that are hopefully created that will make it a better space to work.
So much was just said, like from like, yes, no, there is no Batman and Joker situation, no good guy, bad guy. Don't come at me with your feelings and your fragility, which is, thank God for that's being rewritten as like white violence instead of white fragility. I think that's like super important. Going into making sure, you know, you stand up in it with that risk and don't just be so frail that every time if you get some pushback, absolutely. Aretha, you hit right there on the end. You were talking about that exception, right? Like there's also always like that exceptionalism where people want to be like, well, but there's this one person who has this one restaurant here, and I see the same 2-3 people that people have on deck ready to go. Like, I know this Black person. So there, I mean, that in itself tends to be a little like, not a little bit, that tends to be like a huge barrier in people being able to, or in people who hold power, their ability to accept that something needs to change, right? If I see this one person who made it, then why can't everybody else make it, right? Like bootstrap that, and it's not always real. What other fallacies do you see in the way that tend to be like a barrier for change? Emany, you want to hit that one up?
Sure. Okay. So what? I'm sorry. Can you repeat that for?
Yeah, like are there any other like falsehoods, like anything that like these stories or narratives that are out there that people are, that you see as being like used as an excuse, as like as a barrier to like why people aren't changing, right? Like people, like I think one thing that people often say is like, I don't know where to find somebody, right? Like I don't, where do I find Black people? I don't know any. Like,
Right. Wow. Okay. Yeah. So I'm sorry. This is just it's rough because you know, most of the places that I've worked, it's always been like the owners who have always been like, oh, we didn't even realize that, you know what I'm saying, as a Black woman, that they professionally that we exist, right? Like we can be at home in the kitchen, we can do that, but we can't be chefs. So, you know, I just it's one of those things where it's like I'm getting like stuck. Sorry, but the people in leadership, they don't know how to take accountability for the things that are going on, right? They just don't. And so when they say, oh, they can't find people or they don't know Black people, that's not the case at all. It's more so of a situation where I don't want to have a Black person in my kitchen, or I don't want to have a Black person on my staff, or I don't want to have a Black person in management. But instead of addressing it like that, I'm just going to say that I can't find anybody. That's not true at all. You know, there are plenty of Black men and women who want the opportunity, who are overqualified for these opportunities, but simply because of who they are, they can't get them. And so that's something that I've seen in the industry. That's something that a lot of my coworkers or people that I've encountered have, you know, they've all witnessed. Me personally, there was a job I had where I had been there for a year, and I was literally the only Black person in that kitchen. And I had somebody come in, a kid straight out of high school, like culinary was his major, and got promoted within 3 months. Me, I was there for a year. I'm still a line cook, making change. And it's like, it's crazy because I come into these kitchens where I train these people and get these people to where they need to be, and then you're overlooked. And it's like having that conversation with an executive chef, or having that conversation with a manager or owner, and it's just like, yeah, no, I just don't want you in leadership. And it's no other reason than being a Black person, right? But instead of saying that to my face, it's just, oh, well, we don't think you're qualified enough. But I'm qualified to run your line. I'm qualified to train your people. I'm qualified to make sure that things are done properly and that food gets out, in a timely manner and things like that. But I'm not qualified to be in management. No, that's a system. That's a system that, again, looks down on the people that honestly love it, right? Love what we do, love the people that's involved, but it's a system that, again, is against us. They want us for our labor, but they don't want us for anything else. So yeah, that's what I got for you.
I was in the back like, well,
Sorry, I kind of got stuck there. I had to bring it all in because.
No, don't apologize. Don't ever apologize for your greatness, okay? Don't ever.
Thank you.
All right, that was some smoke. To add on to that, I think, especially in our industry, there are so many organizations that, are fighting food insecurity, which is great, right? Like, that's a huge problem. It's like in New York and obviously all across the country. And I recently had a conversation with an organization who I won't name. I mean, it was an introductory conversation. But I was just like, if you want me to be involved in your organization, like, first and foremost, are you acknowledging the fact that most of the people who I'm sure you're helping are Black and brown? And then are we looking at your board and the people who are involved in your organization and saying, where is the disconnect here, right? Because I think oftentimes, why people like to pat themselves on the back and saying, like, we are helping underserved communities. Look at us, partnering with so-and-so to help bring food to these families, which is amazing. Don't get me wrong. But then it's like, what's the step further? How are we getting those people, those young kids, interested in food in a way because they haven't experienced, high quality ingredients? Like, they're not going to Union Square Green Market and being like, where are the ramps? It's like, they're just trying to figure out how are we going to get food on the table. And so I think another barrier that a lot of people in our industry don't account for is like, it's getting those kids at a young age to see how great high quality ingredients and high quality food is, to get them interested in the culinary industry to begin with, right? Like, I didn't grow up eating like high quality meals. It wasn't until like I got to like college and beyond, I was like, yo, Cheesecake Factory is not fine dining. Like, what is happening? And so I think grasping those kids at a younger age, like partnering with schools at a younger age, getting them more interested in the culinary arts in these underserved communities. So that way in the future, there's a even greater pool of applicants, and not just a bunch of white kids who were blessed enough to eat at Michelin star restaurants since the age of 5 versus, kids who are eating McDonald's because they think that's the best that they can get. The culinary industry and the food industry is so much bigger than that. And so how do we start capturing those kids' interests at a younger age so that they are interested in going, not even necessarily to culinary school, but just starting to work in restaurants and starting to build their way up into a restaurant. So eventually we do have more and more people who are not only hourly employees, but then who move into management as well.
I just wanted to, everything that you said, Emany, is like really just resonating with me. And I just want to apologize to you, only because, like, I can understand how hard that experience is of being a professional and being treated that way. And I also understand that that type of bias that you were at the receiving end of is so problematic you know, just in terms of like your mental health and your ability to move forward. And I congratulate you on just your perseverance and just getting up every day and showing up for work and always showing up and being your best, because to kind of like walk with that is a heavy load. So you know, I think it's just important to recognize that you are walking with that, and it doesn't define you in any way because it has nothing to do with you. But you don't deserve that. And I hope that everyone who's watching, you know, can just hear what she had to say and understand that when you bring those behaviors into a work environment, you are having a lasting effect on people's lives and their ability to be productive in our society. You know, I think that in terms of like barriers, I think one of the biggest barriers, and maybe something that I've been kind of signaling along the way, is that, you know, like the rules that we understand about capitalism is like the biggest one. You know, um, you know, they force us to think that we have to behave in a certain way to be acceptable, and those rules are defined by someone else. And so, you know, and all of the things that exist in the industry are a result of a capitalistic system that is designed around white supremacy. So like when we talk about like the barriers, we actually have to look at every single thing that is part of our industry and ask, like, is this actually the right way to be doing business? We actually have to revisit all of those things. We can't just carry on and then tell people like, well, you need to be more like this in order to be here. It's like, no, like I need to actually make some changes right now so that I can make up for this discrepancy that we've created, that is actually not, again, not a productive way of existing as an organization. And so, you know, our current system is the biggest barrier. And the moment that we accept what it is and the fact that everything that we do is designed around it, including the way we exchange money, you know, we just need to ask more questions and decide that the rules aren't set in stone.
Uh, 10,000% thank you. And thank you for offering up that that apology to Emany. I feel like you were speaking directly to Emany, but you were speaking to so many other people who have, you know, also experienced it. I'm sure that you know that's touched a lot. Like that moment right there, touched a lot of people that we can't even see right now.
Yeah, maybe if I could just tell
Yeah.
Sabrina, thank you for that. That meant so much to me. You know, I don't think people realize the experiences that we go through in this industry. I don't think people fully understand how taxing it is, not just physically, but like emotionally and mentally. So I definitely want to thank you for that. Okay.
Yeah. Man, I feel like that's really gonna give somebody like an opportunity or a leeway to heal, and that's always like the power of Black women. Like put them together, and there's gonna be like a space created. So that's ultimately uplifting. And I just am grateful to have been able to be here for that. Thank you. I think asking questions is 1000% the like a way as people who work inside of the industry to really start to push back, right? Seeing yourself and as the most valuable thing, right? Our industry is ultimately made up of people, right? It's an exchange of not necessarily always, you know, money, but you know, also like community. You know, my question is, what questions? Let's pose it like this, because Aretah and Emany, you guys are still in the industry from a position right now of being people who are employed. And Sabrina, you're from a position of being an employer. So I would ask Aretah and Emany, what questions would you either to somebody else or your younger self advise people who are interviewing or yeah, like a lot of people are like re-entering the industry right now. What questions do you want people who are interviewing like to really like ask to like push back to make sure that they are taking a position of power in the interview? They are not necessarily being interviewed, but they are interviewing the job itself. And then I'll put it to Sabrina to say like, what questions would you like to hear people who were coming in to interview, like hard hitting questions you'd like them to ask?
Aretha, did you want to? Okay, well, I guess for me personally, as someone who is constantly doing interviews, I think one of my main important question is, what is the job culture like, right? What when I come into your back at the house, what does that culture entail? Am I walking into a situation where, it's masculine dominated, which I mean I expect, but is it something where, I can be comfortable walking into, or am I gonna have to prove myself, like I've had to do in the past? Like, what is that culture like? When I'm speaking to a chef, one of the questions I often ask the chef is, and I know it may sound a little crazy, but it's like, what is your family life like? Because that tells me a lot about what I'm going to be walking into. If you're a single white male with no other really responsibilities other than your job, I can expect that you're going to treat me as if I'm just a number, right? But if you're a chef who has a family, then I can expect to be treated another type of way. But also, and sometimes, I don't know, I ask the crazy questions, but sometimes I go, what was your upbringing like? Because in what type of situation did you grow up in? Because if you grew up, I'm in the South, right? So that's a completely different situation in itself. So being in the South, I need to know, did you grow up on the proper side of town where you don't see many people that look like me, or did you grow up where did you go to school with, 85% of the population is Black, or did you not? Because all of these things play a part in how I'm going to be treated in that kitchen. And so these are often things that I ask, and I honestly, when I tell my friends when they're going on interviews, I tell them to ask these questions, because although they can be a bit personal, it kind of lets you gauge how things are going to go in your kitchen. Also, do you employ just Hispanics? Do you just employ, because when you go into a kitchen, people don't often see, a lot of times you're going to have, I'd say maybe 50% of your staff, depending on the type of the kitchen. It's funny, already you brought up the Cheesecake Factory, because I worked there for a year, right? And within that year, I think most of the people I worked with were Hispanic. And then there were maybe 5 Black people on the line. And then the front of the house was a mixture. And I bring that up to say, a lot of times, even then in kitchens, what I've noticed is an employer will prefer a Hispanic person over a Black person, just for the simple stigma of they'll work cheaper and they'll work faster. And I've noticed that. So, these are all questions that I ask. I've definitely been denied a couple of jobs because of these questions, but I'm okay with that, because I went home knowing that at the end of the day, the things that I needed to know for me is what I needed to know. So, there you go.
Emany has the smoke, just like all day. Just wow. It's funny you asked that, MJ. I think the question I wish I'd asked more when I was going on trails, especially as a younger cook, was about the work culture, the work-life culture. Especially as someone who's worked in fine dining like my whole career, there's this expectation that you're just like supposed to be okay with like working under terrible conditions with terrible pay and just like you're just doing it to get better. And it's like, yeah, like that's sure, like I'm getting better like in my technical skills, but at what cost? Like at what cost of my emotional health, my physical health? And so I think that's the question I want more cooks and people in the industry who are coming up to be asking employers. And also during your trail, because of course the boss is going to say one thing, because the boss is not going to be like, our culture is terrible, we abuse the staff. Like no one's dumb enough to say that. And so when you're on your trail, it's also important that the cooks ask the employees, the hourly employees, the staff. It's like observe the environment around you, observe how the sous chefs are talking to the cooks, and observe how the front of house managers are talking to the runners and the servers and the baristas, because the employers are always going to tell you one thing, and it's like, okay, sure, they can say that their culture is a healthy culture, but what are you observing around you, and what are the other staff telling you that may or may not contradict that? And so just knowing that, I think, especially when trails come in, I like try really hard, and all of us in our kitchen try really hard to have an environment where like it's clear we're having fun, it's clear that we're making really good food, and that we care a lot, but it's also like we're not trying to make anyone feel absolutely horrible every single day just because like we're putting food on a plate. Like it's not life or death. Like truly it isn't. And I just think like the work life culture is so important, because then it really does affect your own personal life. Because then it's like if you're going to work every day getting abused and then you come home like that, you take that with you, right? Like you that's not something you can just brush off easily. And so I wish I had known that it was as important for me to advocate for my own, like the work-life culture that I wanted to be a part of, and not just like, I want to work in XYZ kitchen because I want to be the best cook, right? Because you can be a great cook, but then eventually, and this is the problem that we've seen in our industry, all these great cooks become sous chefs, and they're monsters because that's the only environment they ever grew up in. And that's the only environment that's been allowed and been okayed because it's all about the food. And it's like, no, like you could also be a good person. Like that would be pretty sick. So that's the question that I know I wish I'd asked more. And I'm sure that Sabrina, as an employer, like this, that's a question that like you think about a lot, because it really does, the work-life culture, if it's a healthy one, really will create better food professionals overall. Because I'm personally over just seeing the really intelligent chef who's great on the plate, but just does not know how to manage people whatsoever. It's no longer an environment that it should have never been acceptable, but it's absolutely no longer acceptable, especially during this time, during the pandemic, when everyone's realizing like, oh, cooks actually don't want to go back to work because it sucked working in these kitchens. So I guess that's where my head is at personally.
Wow. I don't even know where to start with this whole thing, but I would say I'm probably not the best restaurant owner to ask this question, because I am looking for someone who is not hell-bent on maintaining all of that when we interview, if they come with experience. But listening to Emany speak again, I just have to just say that I couldn't stop thinking about like the anti-discriminatory rules that govern what employers are allowed to ask on an interview to make hiring more equitable. But that doesn't mean that employers are, following those rules, right? Because if an employee or someone who's coming to interview for a job has to ask those questions, we have so many problems. Like, it is just highlighting how many problems we have. Like, if one of the questions is your entire staff Mexican? Like, and this place is in a white neighborhood. You know what, it is, that is proof in the pudding that that place is um are using biases to make their hiring decisions, you know. And I just wonder, like, why is that okay? Like, if we're trying, if the industry or whoever makes the HR, I should know because I have like the big posters, but the labor laws, the people who make the labor laws are saying, you know, like, you're not allowed to employ these things. Then they actually need to go to these places and say, oh, it looks like, you know, based on the location of this establishment and who you would naturally have as employees, like, you clearly are employing these practices, so we need to do something about it. So anyway, I'm gonna leave that at that.
I think we might have lost Emany for a second, and that is the world of the internet. Hopefully, she'll be able to bounce back on with us. I think Sabrina, what you just said. I think the problem is that that's not illegal at all, right? Like, like, like those work. Like, I don't know. I remember a time ago, like, and I'm not sure you guys have heard this, but somebody was like if somebody's paying you minimum wage, that means if they could pay you less, they would. And I definitely think that when you talk about people or kitchens that tend to hire migrant workers, if you form any kind of a business based on like not having to pay people for labor, there is a mindset that you are playing into. It has something to do with enslavement and white supremacist culture, which is which is what we are talking about dismantling today. I really do appreciate everybody who took time to participate in this and to give you your experience. Yep, slide just changed. We have about 10 minutes left. So we have a couple of questions that have come through in the chat. I want to give you guys, because I think that, after having done a couple of these, you kind of get similar questions. And keeping in mind that it is not your responsibility to solve everyone's problems right now, and I definitely don't want to pose these questions to you as such. I would like to give you an opportunity, if you would like, to maybe recommend a book. I'll make Aretah go first since you got that stack behind you. Any kind of book having to do maybe with a little bit of like history about food, something that centers the Black experience.
First of all, calling me out on my stack. Food, a book about food that centers the Black experience. So I will say the book I read the most recently was Mashama Bailey and Jono's book, talking about their experience with the Gray and opening that, which was super interesting to read because it was interesting hearing that interplay between like this white man like essentially figuring out race in Savannah, and then like Mashama just being like Jono was like having like all these like essentially like pseudo existential crises about like race a little bit, and Mashama was like, you're also like overthinking this whole moment, like you were thinking like, what if these Black people thought that? I was just like, yo, like how long in the food, like. And so like that was interesting to read because I actually think more white people need to read that book, especially in this day and age, like white people are overthinking everything about race to the point where it's just like, I hear you. I appreciate that you're trying, but like I'm also just doing my job right now. Like I'm also like I'm not like thinking about I'm not like walking around the tavern with like a ticker tape being like 1 Black person, 2 Black people. It's like, listen, like it's exciting that Black people are here, like, but you know, my job isn't to figure out like how do we diversify our taverns like cover count right now. My job is to make sure the food gets out. And so I think that was like that's a good book to read. It's like, you know, it's current. They're both crushing it. But I think it's helpful, especially for white people, to hear a Black woman be like, to say her piece in response to things that like they might be thinking about at any given moment, especially about race, where they're just like, oh no, and it's just like, you know, I hear you, I appreciate that you are trying, but also like, don't overthink this. Like it's okay. Like this is a lifelong journey. We're not solving it in 2 weeks. Like this is not, we're not going to get to next Black History Month and all of a sudden we've figured out race in America. So, you know, I think that's a good book. I think that's a good book to start with, for sure.
I'm slightly embarrassed to say that I have no books to recommend. Partially because I decided sometime last year that when people ask me to make a recommendation about an action they can take, I just kind of sit out because that's a personal decision. And it really is based on where you're at and what you understand and what you know. So it really is just kind of looking for the information that's meant to support you along this journey. But also I have 2 kids and I work full time and I am married. So I don't have time to read, unfortunately, as much as I'd like to. It is a pandemic.
That's real. That's super 100%. That's why I was saying, like, look, these questions come in every time. I definitely appreciate the fact that you're like, that's up to you. That's up to you, friend. I might also add in there if I could, just just plug a Black author. If you just want to read about like some Black foodways and whatnot, if you just need to start from the get go, I definitely always will say Dr. Jessica Harris is high on the hog, and then also Leah Penniman, Farming While Black are also like great food like reference books. You know what I'm saying? If you just want to like really sit down and actually and read, if you're gonna actually do the learning. I mean, or if you know what, if you're just gonna have a nice coffee table piece, go ahead and send your finances that way, and support what they're doing over there. Hey, friend, you made it back. I did want to read. I'm so happy because like that timing couldn't have been any more perfect. I did want to put this one out there for you, Emany. Can you hear me? Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh man. There's a comment in the chat that says, I'm struck by how rare a conversation this is. What are panelists dreaming of for a liberated hospitality industry?
Wow. Wow. Okay. What are panelists dreaming of for liberated? Man, I just want equality in the industry. You know, I just want to be able to walk into a kitchen and know that regardless of, you know, my gender and the color of my skin, I'm going to be treated like another person on the line. I don't want to walk into a kitchen and like, you always have those first day jitters. You know, where it's like, oh, what is it going to be like? But, you know, when I walk into a kitchen, I'm like, okay, what is going to happen here? How long am I going to be here? Because, you know, I'm one of those people where if I feel like I'm being disrespected in any type of a way, I'm out. You know, I've in the what 8 years I've been in this industry, I've worked at a lot of places simply because of that reason alone. So I think yeah, I think that would be my main thing is I just want to be able to come to work and just be okay. You know, it's exhausting work going into a job where every day you know there's going to be an issue for whatever reason simply because of who you are. It's exhausting. It is. It's exhausting. Um, and so not only that, but Aretah spoke a lot about fine dining, um, and people don't realize it'd be easier for me to become a GM for a corporate restaurant than it is for me to get a job at a restaurant where, you know, it's considered fine dining. And I think I've only had one fine dining job. And you know, and it honestly has nothing to do with my experience. You know, for me, I think it's a fear because that one fine dining job kind of traumatized me. I worked for a chef who was the epitome of like that guy who, you know, excuse my language, but was an ass. Um, you know, it was about getting the plates out and only that. You know, he promoted people. I just want to be able to come to work. And if I'm working 12, 13, 14 hours a day, I want to know that, you know, I'm doing it for somebody who, or even for myself, honestly, to just be able to know that it's a fair work environment. Um, I think that's my dream. Other than having my own, that's like, yeah, that's liberation for me. I think that's liberation, and seeing more people that look like me too. Yeah, that aren't just dishwashers or line cooks.
Thank you for that. Absolutely. We have about 1 minute left. 30 seconds to Aretah and Sabrina.
Yeah, I mean, just a quick piggyback, like same here. I wanna come to work and know like that I'm gonna have a good time and like people are gonna see me as a chef. I think like recently, within like the last like 2 weeks, multiple guests at the restaurant didn't realize I was a sous chef there, even though I have a chef coat on with my name on it with Gramercy Tavern. They're like, oh, are you a chef? And to me, it's like you don't realize how exhausting of a question that is, where it's just like I've worked so hard in my career to get to this point. I'm literally wearing a chef coat. I didn't like buy this just for fun. Like I earned this. So like that's what I want, to be able to like always know I can go to a table, talk to guests, ask them about their experience, and they're like, chef, you did a great job. Not like, oh, are you a chef here? Or like, you know, that question in and of itself is painful and soul sucking every time.
And I could just add quickly that, you know, as an owner of a business, like being able to prioritize the safety of our employees in every decision that we make, and feeling supported in doing so. You know, I can't say that that exists at the moment, and I would love for that to exist because we'll be able to really create more inclusive spaces, safer spaces.
Absolutely. And if I may, with these last 10 seconds, also say clear pathways to ownership, and the ability to be self-determinant in those in that ownership. Not relying on have to rely on anybody else's standards or how they think our system should work. Yeah, thank you. You're such powerful and amazing people, and I'm so grateful, so grateful to be able to have been here. Please let's stay in touch. Shout out to JBF. Hashtag open for good. Shout out to shout out to Drive Change. the Hospitality for Social Justice program. Check that out if you really want some answers. Cool. Farewell. Adore you all.